You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
All right, welcome back. We are joined by a couple of state representatives. Of course, everyone's familiar with Mike Unes, but someone from outside of our viewing area, Tom Demmer. Thank you very much for being here, both of you.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
All right, so of course we've been spending the last few weeks kind of inviting our local lawmakers in to talk about the budget process, and we have a unique opportunity here because Representative Demmer, you were really in the weeds on the budget process. So tell us a little bit about exactly what your role was in the weeks leading up to this this budget deal.
Well, as you know, any budget negotiation takes a very long time. So over the course of the months that we were in regular session, we had more meetings than I can count, where we had rank and file members from both parties, both chambers came together, just sat around a table and talked about what were important budget priorities for us. As time went on, that group got a little bit smaller. We had more regular meetings. We met, every single day for hours and hours and really hammered through what we thought a reasonable compromise budget could be. So at the end of the day, we had folks from the House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, all sitting around the same table, and that's how we were able to deliver a bipartisan compromise budget.
And Representative Unes, you and I were talking before today about what a difference a year makes, almost a year, from where we were last summer. Obviously, you were among those who voted to override the governor's veto on that budget last year. But this summer, everybody's home with a bipartisan, balanced budget in an election year, no less.
That's right. And, I remember being on your show, I think the second week in May while we were going through this. And I really said at the time that what I was advocating for was a reasonable approach, finding common ground, building off of a common consensus, which I believe personally that started with the 2018 budget, because if you remember what we saw right after the 2018 budget, we had real meaningful school funding reform in bipartisan fashion that was nearly unanimous. And I think that we were able to build off of that, and it carried forward into the 2019 process. And it's what I was advocating for. I'm very proud that we were able to see it through to fruition.
Now, of course, Representative Demmer, in an election year, everybody wants to go home with a budget because it's something that, at least in this case, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, folks are able to say it was bipartisan. But you do have critics who, I think, no matter what kind of budget you are going to pass, they're going to say, we're never going to vote for it. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be balanced. And I think at the end of the day, that's because you have to wait some months because you're working off of estimates.
Oh, absolutely, you're working off of estimates. Just like any business is making a budget that is based on estimates, so is the government. So what we're looking at is trying to get reasonable, conservative estimates that come from disinterested groups, third parties who can give us some objectivity. We think we've built this year's budget to be balanced. We built in some contingencies. We don't assume that everything will go exactly how we assumed it would go. So we have some cushion built into that. But look, at the end of the day, we walked away with a compromise budget that wasn't what anybody was looking for 100%, but it was a reasonable bipartisan effort to move us forward. I think it gives the state the kind of stability and predictability we need for the upcoming year.
One thing that you built into this budget, not just you specifically, but lawmakers built into this budget that we mentioned earlier in the show, is this online sales tax ruling that came down from the Supreme Court. Because for all the dysfunction of state government over the past few years and all the accusations of being not forward thinking, there was some forward thinking on this ruling, really anticipating how the Supreme Court of the United States was going to rule in this instance.
Yeah, that's right. So we built in some language that allowed the state to take advantage of the Supreme Court ruling if it were to come down. This was a way that we could make sure that over the course of the summer, we knew the Supreme Court ruling would come during the summer when we're not in session. We didn't want to miss out on several months of that, so we got it done in advance. And really what it does is it fundamentally restores some fairness and some competitiveness to Illinois businesses by not allowing out-of-state retailers to get an advantage that people in Illinois don't have.
Now, Representative Unes, last summer, obviously, that vote that I mentioned earlier that you took with some other members, obviously to break the governor's veto. You took a lot of criticism for that. But part of this budget deal relied on that tax hike that was passed last summer. How has the reaction this summer been different?
I think the biggest difference is hearing from my constituency, and I think others from all across the state, whether it be in a poor district or in an affluent district, is people want to see their government work. People want to see a return to some civility, and I think for so long we saw so much incivility and government not working, and I just think it's a bright spot for the state. Nobody is saying this is perfect. Nobody is saying our work is done. In fact, we have a lot more work to do. We have to have some of the reforms that are needed. We have to have some of the forward thinking that Representative Demmer just talked about. We need more of that. And I think a way to do that is continuing to find that common ground so that you can build trust. And when you build trust, it's going to be a lot easier to build consensus and work together. And I think that's what the constituency wants to see, is government working properly.